We're going to continue our discussion of what are primates and where do we fit in. Before we get into this, I just want to point out that we could give an entire course just on, say, Old World monkeys or New World monkeys. And very frequently, there are courses that go on for 1 or 2 semesters to understand all of the adaptations of primates. So we're just scratching the surface here to show you the diversity in primates. And if you're interested, you could pursue this in a number of ways. You can go to the zoo and start watching them. Maybe you've got some primates in the neighborhood where you live. Or you can take a course where you talk about their diet and their behavior and their social structure, their anatomy, and so forth and so on. Okay, so we've established that there are about 250 species of primates, living primates today, that they're basically tropical, subtropical animals, except for humans. Let's not forget that humans are also primates. And you remember that Mivart broke them up into prosimians and into anthropoids. So let's take a closer look at prosimians, meaning pre-monkey or pre-ape, prosimian. You'll know some of these. There are lorises and patos, bush babies, or sometimes called galagos, lemurs, and of course our tarsier friend in the upper right-hand corner. Now, what are the distinguishing features of prosimians as a group? Okay, they have generally a long muzzle, like your dog, a naked rhinarium, as it's called, a little wet nose. They have sensory whiskers, like the house cat. They have often a very specialized claw, which is called a grooming claw, on the second digit of their foot for grooming. And as you know, some of them have the specialization as a tooth comb. They have, some of them have only a post-orbital bar, not an enclosed orbit. The tarsier has almost a complete eye socket, but not quite. The others do. And they have a 2-part mandible. So it's not fused in the middle like our mandible is. And I mentioned the tooth claw. Prosimians include things like bush babies, as you see there, very large ears in these often, because it helps them echolocate, or not echolocate, but locate sounds. Maybe they're insect eaters and they, detect them moving through the foliage. Very large eyes, because many of these are nocturnal and they spend their times at night, and very special adaptations in some of their hands, for example, for catching insects. Tarsiers, as I said, we've talked about several times, lorises and patos. And lemurs are one of my favorite groups of prosimians. I spent a wonderful 2.5 weeks on Madagascar a number of years ago, off the coast of East Africa. And it is an island that is suffering from deforestation, and the habitats for these creatures are disappearing. It's very unfortunate that lemurs are really rapidly in decline. And unfortunate because lemurs are only found on the island of Madagascar. In the past, there were, I think, 17 species of what were called subfossil lemurs that no longer exist. Humans moved there about 2,000 years ago, began to populate the island, and began to kill and eat some of these larger primates, like they killed these large giant tortoises, and there was an elephant bird that went extinct once humans got there. But beginning, the fossil record beginning about 30,000 years ago, up to about 500 years ago, when these subfossil primates, or subfossil lemurs, which were large, some of them up to 350 pounds. Today, most lemurs are about this size, or like the mouse lemur, just weighs about 1 ounce and sits in the palm of your hand. But they have undergone extinction. Their habitats have changed dramatically. The habitats that many of those large lemurs lived in have just simply disappeared. So it's very unfortunate that we have lost this diversity of lemurs, and we are losing lemurs at a very rapid pace. You don't have to obviously know and memorize all the names of these things, but just to show you an incredible diversity. One of the most terrestrial and most well known to all of you are ring-tail lemurs, because they have black rings around their tails in terms of the colors of their fur. Their pelage color, facial shape, and so on are often very distinctive and different. But they distinguish themselves very much on the basis of their coloration and their fur. And those are things that don't fossilize. And at one point, people have looked at this diversity in lemurs and suggested that if you stripped them of their fur and their skin and looked at the bones, you wouldn't be able to break them up into a whole bunch of distinct species, because most of the distinctions are in things like mating call or the colorations or the behavior. Those things don't fossilize. So you would, in a fossil sample of lemurs, underestimate the numbers of species in the past, because those distinguishing features just simply don't survive in the fossil record. The genus Daubentonia, named after a famous French naturalist, Daubenton, popularly called the ai, because that's the sound it makes, ai, like that. And it is a nocturnal lemur. Doesn't look much like a primate, does it? Looks kind of weird. And it is strange in many ways. It was, I think, at one time classified as a rodent and not a primate, because in rodents, their incisors, the upper and lower incisors, are always gnawing, and they continue to grow through life. So they never, otherwise, they wouldn't have anything to chew with. So they are continually growing these incisors. And this lemur has, as you can see, quite a good set of incisors there. And it has a reduced number of teeth in the back. And the teeth in the back, the crushing teeth, are flat surface. There are no cusps on them. They're just using them to squish something. And on their middle finger, I think it is, they have a long claw. It's a long finger and a long claw. And you see they have very large ears, and they're very mobile. And it turns out that they are nocturnal, active at night, and they use those large ears for listening, strangely enough, to branches, and they hear grubs crawling in there. And they use their incisors to gnaw into that branch, and with that claw, they'll spear the grub and they'll eat it. It's a very specialized ecological niche. And what's so fascinating about it is there are no woodpeckers on Madagascar. So what's happened is that this species, Daubentonia madagascarensis, has adapted to a very narrow ecological niche, because that niche was open. And as people say, nature abhors a vacuum. If there is a way of life open that is not occupied, in this case, eating grubs, one creature will evolve to fit into that ecological niche. And I think it's an interesting story. Lorises, bush babies, and pottos probably are less familiar to you. Pottos and bush babies are found in Africa, and lorises in Asia. And these, again, are generally nocturnal, generally insect eaters, as you see. The lesser bush baby, you see, is a very tiny creature and lives in Africa. Tarsiers are a very specialized group that practice par excellence this mode of locomotion known as vertical clinging and leaping. And look at the skull of a tarsier up here. Isn't that amazing? Look at the size of that orbit. The eyeball that fits in there, each eyeball is bigger than its brain. So obviously, if you found a fossil with this sort of arrangement, you would know that it was a nocturnal creature living at night. And indeed, it does live at night. And moving on to the Anthropoidea, meaning monkeys, apes, and human, how do we characterize this group? They have a much more reduced muzzle, much more flattened faces. They have maybe a hairy or dry nose. They have nails, no claws. They have nails on all digits. They have a complete bony eye orbit. and they have a fused lower jaw. And you're just looking at a number of examples here. New World monkeys, sometimes called platyrrhines, meaning flat-nosed, are a strange group, and we don't know how they got to the New World. We have no idea how they got there. Somehow they made it across from Africa, but we don't know how they did that. Their dental formula is different. What do you notice about it? It has an extra premolar, one of these extra bicuspids. And they're all arboreal. There are none living on the ground, like Old World monkeys. One, Aotus, is a nocturnal monkey, and it has very large orbits. And some of them, as you can see in this spider monkey down here, I have to put my glasses on to see this a little more clearly, is hanging from its tail. Now, most monkeys you see, and most monkeys you see in movies, have tails that are used for balance. They're not a grasping organ. But in the New World, there are some monkeys, like the spider monkey, that can actually wrap it around a branch and hang from it. And on the end of that tail is a little print, just like on the tips of our fingers and toes. It's called a dermatoglyph. And they are restricted to Central America and to the distribution you see in the lower corner here in South America. So some of them do come up into Central America, and there's a wide variety of them. And not much of a fossil history. The Old World monkeys, sometimes called catarrhines, include Old World monkeys, apes, and humans. That is the Old World classification. And it includes the apes as well as humans. And here we have that classic dental formula, 2-1, 2-3 over 2-1, 2-3. They're all diurnal. There are no nocturnal apes, except humans when they stay out all night. They are all either exclusively or partly terrestrial. And the monkeys in general tend to have, especially the African monkeys and macaques and so on, these cornified pads on the bottom of their buttocks that are called ischial callosities that allows them to sit for long periods of time on branches. So just to go back for a second, here you can see the distribution of Old World monkeys and apes. So the Old World monkeys are broken down into two groups. They're called colobines and cercopithecines. Colobines have very narrow incisors, a very broad interorbital distance, very deep jaw, teeth that are very good at slicing up leaves. These are adapted to a leafy diet. They're folivores, as it's called, and they have complex stomachs to digest those. And they have very short thumbs and long legs, and a very long tail because they are essentially arboreal. Cercopithecines often come to the ground. These are more familiar monkeys to you. They have much broader incisors, a shallow jaw, they have low cusps on their teeth, and they have one adaptation that's important to focus on. Inside their cheeks, there is a flap and a little pouch, and they're called cheek pouches. And if you go to a zoo and watch these monkeys during feeding time, you'll see that they'll fill those pouches and their cheeks will stretch out like that because they push shoots and seeds and all sorts of things back into those. Old World monkeys, macaques are a very large group. Langurs, proboscis monkey is found in Borneo, and it's one of the only monkeys that swims. The largest, most widespread monkey in Africa is called a vervet monkey or black-faced monkey, and you find them all over Africa. And there's a great diversity in Old World monkeys, as you can see. Again, I don't want you to have to memorize all of these things. Snow monkeys are found in Japan, in northern Japan, where they actually live in very cold environments, very unusual. But it's this wonderful diversity in primates that makes them so special. And you should go to your local zoo or go on some safaris or or trips to try to find and observe some of these creatures in the wild. And in the next presentation, we will consider the apes and mention, of course, humans.